The rights to basics, food, clothing, shelter, safety, dignity, education, opportunity, are not just being challenged by a shrinking economy, but also by the challenges of readjusting ourselves to a language, to a lifestyle, to a life that we would never have considered, and finally, to the true concept of globalization. Not just one of economic power or one of financial exchange, but one that pours out the true humanity and the true interconnectedness that is all of us. Of course, there's no conversation that can be had about human rights today that does not include environmental degradation and environmental rights, access to resources, and what that looks like. And so, a few remarks from myself in my personal capacity, not as that of the global board member. The first is this, that we need to redefine who our protagonists are as human rights defenders. Traditionally, human rights defenders have looked towards governments to make sure that laws are followed and that they are upheld, to ensure that basic needs reach those, and that there's a quality of life that assures dignity. But we have new players, non-state actors, private corporations, for-profit companies, multinationals, and suddenly they too affect whether or not we get access to medicine, access to healthcare, access to food, and whether our land will be poisoned at the end of the 10, 15, 20, or 25-year leases that they take in order to grow commercial crops that may or may not feed those who actually grow them. And so who must we be in the face of this new challenge? Well, I'd suggest the following, ladies and gentlemen. Number one, we need to reimagine the future. In Kenya, we have a saying, vitu kwa ground ni different. Actually, it's in the world today. Everywhere around the world, things are different and must be different. Before we speak about rebuilding better, we need to reimagine what it is that we are building, and reimagine it perhaps for the first time from scratch, because everything that we have assumed has been challenged and shaken to its roots in the last 2 years. We talk about having a seat at the table. Well, maybe we need to redesign not just the table, but all the furniture in the room. In fact, maybe we need to redesign the room and ask ourselves whether we need to have a room. Because inclusivity might require that walls come down which were not up before. As human rights defenders, and all of us are human rights defenders, when you complain about water, electricity, traffic, the potholes on the roads, how you expect better service, what you're actually agitating for is for dignity and for the basics to be upheld. So perhaps to reconstitute ourselves as more agile, as more responsive, as more, rather than less, united, more resourced, more focused, and more, rather than less, focused on who it is that we're targeting and who we're fighting for. I was speaking earlier with colleagues in the holding room, and we raised the idea of silos. I'm from Amnesty, and therefore we speak on rights. You're from UN AIDS, and therefore you speak on HIV. He's from UNFPA, and he only speaks about population and issues affecting family planning. And yet we're speaking to the same woman. All of us in our own time, asking her to spend her time listening to fragmented parts of herself as though she is not one whole. We need to refocus. It's not enough that we call one another or call others to meetings and tick boxes. We must measure and monitor and evaluate ourselves by the impact that we have on the people that we're serving. As citizens, I think, as humans, we've got to understand that no one is coming to fix our problems. No one's coming. No one's out there. whether it's a global south where we can exchange an abstract conceptual cryptocurrency called carbon quotas in an exchange where emission trading can assure those who are the largest polluters that in some tropical island, some natives will plant some trees in order to counter the devastation of unbridled industrial emissions, as though the 2 degrees won't go up still. Or whether it's a global north from where money must pour in order to compensate for us doing what is right, taking care of our environment. We're all in this together. And as we have learned in this pandemic, injustice, inequality, deprivation, irresponsibility anywhere, whether it's through vaccine handling, vaccine hoarding, pollution-inducing, global warming, with its concomitant effects on small island states, or on rainfall patterns in the Rift Valley, or on food production, injustice, inequality, anywhere, is a threat to justice and equality everywhere. And my sincere prayer, as we commemorate this Human Rights Day under the theme Equality, Reducing Inequalities and Advancing Human Rights, my sincere prayer is that the next decade in human rights will be about saving the human, perhaps, and in it, saving the planet. Thank you. I now want to invite onto the stage to make their remarks a number of speakers. Because we have started a little bit late and I am determined to be very respectful of your time, I do have a timekeeper. Where's my timekeeper? Come a little bit closer. This gentleman, Laban, please clap for him. He has a very difficult task. His task is to support our speakers when in their 5-minute speeches. So at the 2-minute mark, and I think at the 1-minute mark, and then at the end, poor Laban over there, who is going to move here, Laban, who is going to move here, who was still moving. See, migratory patterns that we're speaking about. Here's one of them, on a very light note. Excellent. So he will hold up a little banner for you so that we can be able to support everyone to be on time. Thank you so much, Laban. Please, a round of applause for this young man. Thank you. So I want to invite onto the stage first Dr. Bernard Maguessa of the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. And if he can be joined on the stage by Her Excellency Henriette Geiger, the European Union Ambassador, and the Ambassador of Italy. I think then we'll be able to move a little bit faster. His Excellency Alberto Pieri, and Her Excellency Caroline Vicini, the Ambassador of Sweden. I think we'll start with those, starting with you, Dr. Maguessa. Karibu.
Thank you very much, Irene, for this opportunity to speak today. The Cabinet Secretary, Minister of Public Service, Gender, Senior Citizens Affairs, and Special Programs, Professor Margaret Kobia, the Vice Chancellor, University of Nairobi, Professor Kiama, European Union Ambassador, Excellency Henrietta Geiger, Ambassador of Sweden, Excellency Caroline Vicini, the United Nations Secretary General represented by the UN Resident Coordinator in Kenya, Dr. Stephen Jackson, the UN Women Country Representative, Anne Mutavati, UN Victims' Rights Advocate, Jane Connors, United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights represented by the UN Senior Human Rights Advisor, Li Fung, representatives from constitutional commissions and independent offices in Kenya, National Gender Equality Commission, National Police Service, IPOA, among others, representative of the Vice Chancellor of Kisii University, civil society partners, our friends from the media fraternity, all protocols observed. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Receive warm greetings from the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. KNCHR is an A status NHRI for Kenya with the core mandate of ensuring the promotion and protection of human rights in the Republic of Kenya. We gather here today to take stock of the gains, challenges, and together forge a united front towards the continuous enjoyment of human rights in Kenya. This year's International Human Rights Day commemorates the 73rd anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights with the theme Equality, Reducing Inequalities and Advancing Human Rights. Ladies and gentlemen, we must go to the deep definition of the word equality. And this, therefore, calls us to reflect on the manifestations of the inequalities in our society, be they as a result of the structural gaps, could be they as a result of marginalization, or sometimes policies and laws that are not human rights compliant, just to mention a few of the areas for us to reflect. The Bill of Rights under the Chapter 4 of the Constitution of Kenya 2010 provides the citizens of this country a shield in line with the UDHR Article 1, which holds that all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. They are endowed with reason and conscience and should act towards one another in a spirit of brotherhood. This opening article of the UDHR promotes the spirit of equality for us all, and this should be our starting and end point in reflecting on matters equality. Kenya, as one of the most progressive constitutions in the world that forbids any discrimination, and of course with reference to Article 27, which provides that every person is equal before the law and has the right to equal protection and equal benefit of the law, among other provisions. Ladies and gentlemen, we are faced with the COVID-19, which has really impacted in our lives. And as a commission, we keep on calling all the players to ensure that human rights are protected even as we undergo through the challenges of the COVID-19. As a commission, we have taken bold steps to ensure that we monitor the enjoyment of human rights under the COVID-19, and we have been able to provide 3 reports to the citizens of Kenya and the duty bearers with the aim of ensuring that the recommendations are therefore implemented. In the quest for ensuring also equality, I'm proud to say that as a commission, and of course our country, Kenya, has in our gender references added a 3rd gender marker, intersex. And we have made progressive protective measures with the support of the Office of the Attorney General and the Republic of Kenya. As I move to conclude, ladies and gentlemen, we are moving towards an election year, and I want to assure the citizens of the country that the Commission will play its key role in promoting and protecting human rights. We will do the monitoring and ensure that all Kenyans enjoy their rights during this particular period. The Commission is keen to advocate for preventive measures to deter electoral-related sexual violence that continues to be used as a weapon of conflict in the Kenyan elections. The Commission will monitor the election process from the ongoing voter registration, party nominations, campaigns, voting and post-voting events like counting, declaration, and transmission of results. The report will inform key recommendations and advocacy areas for immediate and future interventions in the electoral process. In conclusion, KNCHR has worked tirelessly to bridge divisions and build hope with the aim of empowering the society understand human rights. Timely and united synergies by citizens, state actors, and civil society alike will really help in reducing the inequalities and advancing human rights. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is this mic working? Thank you very much, Dr. Maguessa. Next, some remarks from Her Excellency Henriette Geiger, I'm really hoping I'm not massacring the name. I'm fine. Okay, thank you so much. The Ambassador, European Union. Karibu.
Excellency C.S. Kobia, Excellencies, Ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen. You have no idea how happy I am to be here today to celebrate this Human Rights Day here in Kenya with you. I'm new here in Kenya, and before coming here as ambassador, I was in charge of coordinating the global human rights response of the EU worldwide. So this included also the managing of the largest human rights instrument in this world, the EIDHR, the EU Instrument for the Defense of Human Rights, where over the last 7 years we spent 1.3 billion euros to defend human rights worldwide. This shows you what importance the EU attaches to human rights globally. And the next 7 years, which are starting now, the amount that was allocated to human rights, the new allocation for human rights has even increased to 1.5 billion euros. Why? Because in the EU, we have recognized what happened to human rights in the last years. Even before COVID hit, human rights and the space for human rights has been shrinking. Fundamental rights are under attack worldwide. Kenya is still in a good place if you compare it with many other countries and regions in the world. What we have witnessed globally is terrifying. Millions of human rights defenders around the world every day risk their lives in defense of fundamental rights. And I would just like to call for a moment of silence for all those who gave and lost their lives last year in the defense of human rights worldwide. These are our heroes. These are really the true heroes of our societies. So let's observe a moment of silence to respect all those who gave their lives. Thank you very much. I have known many of them personally, and I can only say how much I admire their courage to stand up for what they believe in. And the best we can do, honoring their memory, is to be inspired to continue to battle for human rights. Now, the EU is supporting national human rights commissions, civil society organizations defending human rights, but also individual human rights defenders, and we have special programs to defend those who defend human rights when they're under threat. But I would just like to say what we have seen is in the human rights area, those who are under most threat are environmental rights defenders. They are the ones who were most under attack, and many of them lost their lives. Also, I would like to say that gender-based violence has a special place in our approach for protection of human rights. And as we are in the 16 days of activism, I would just like to say that gender-based violence has no place in our societies, and we have to fight it with all our means, not only in Kenya, but worldwide. Now, in Kenya, we have taken a number of steps to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. A key aspect was a project launched in May 2020 to support the Kenyan National Human Rights Commission to monitor and mitigate human rights violation in pandemic prevention and response. So, of course, speakers before said what the COVID pandemic did to human rights. I will not repeat that. We are in a much worse place today than we were before the pandemic hit us. And what we are very afraid of is that the pandemic leaves us, but the restrictions will stay. We have to be very firm globally to avoid this. And Kenya has many challenges on human rights as well, but comparatively, we are much better off than other countries in the region and worldwide. What we have to do is build on the good things that we have here: a strong civil society, a growing democratic governance, investment in the judiciary, in state reform, in delivering basic services to the population. And yes, inequality is still a big issue. In Kenya, the EU has developed a new human rights strategy together with our member states. But our new 7-year program that has 500 million euros to fight inequality and leaving no one behind. This is a big weapon that we have, but this is accompanied with political and policy dialogue to keep that political space open and to draw awareness on the importance of human rights. And it's not only the rights. Speakers before me talked about basic inequalities in the society, and human rights has to be seen in this broad context. So I am very hopeful that we can all stand together and commemorate what we have achieved, but very much take energy to uphold human rights in this difficult period for the years to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Balozi. Next, I'll invite onto the stage the Ambassador of Italy, His Excellency Alberto Pieri.
Distinguished guests, including all the authorities, CS Gobia, colleagues, representative of the international organization and of the civil society organization. Every year on this date, 10 December, the date of the United Nations General Assembly, adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948. As an international community, we come together to ensure that, let me quote the late Eleanor Roosevelt, in all those small places, so close to home, so close to each and every one of us, that they cannot be seen on any maps of the world, as we say, to ensure that human rights are observed. We know it's not an easy task, as history, also the most recent one, not far from here in this region, show us but at the same time it's an imperative one. And for example, this was at the basis of the Italian membership to the United Nations Human Rights Council for 2019-2021 mandate. The violations of human rights can take different forms, from the more subtle but not less harming, like the multiple and even innovative ways of compressing the freedom of expression or the right to a due process, to the most vicious and shocking for our modern sensibility, like unlawful or arbitrary killings, like torture, like long prohibited practice such as slavery, and I'd like to stress today, like the plague of gender-based violence. As a matter of fact, today we are also celebrating the end of the 16 days campaign against gender-based violence, which actually is not really an end. It must not an end of our commitment, collective commitment on these issues. You know, women bear the brunt of injustice and disrespect for human rights in an unparalleled way. The COVID pandemic, as we know, has only confirmed that in time of crisis, it's the women who pay the high price. This is true also, unfortunately, during political conflicts. This is why, for example, we strongly believe in our partnership with the Union Women and the UNHCR on the project Let It Not Happen Again, addressing violence against women by strengthening access to justice, whose goal is to strengthen the response and accountability mechanism with regard to gender-based violence in elections, but not only. Working with Kenyan institutions, as well as civil society associations, especially with the organization of exceptionally brave violence survivors. As a personally, I had the honor to see directly what they are doing on this field. As also underlined by Dr. Maguessa, the Kenyan Constitution has established a comprehensive and advanced framework to guarantee the effective protection for human rights. We praise the efforts of all Kenyan stakeholders to apply these principles in practice, and we are glad and would like to reiterate in this occasion our support to collaborate with them in this crucial endeavor. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Balozi. Allow me, even as I invite the ambassador of Sweden to come up, to please ask the UN Women Country Representative, Ms. Anna Mutavati, the UN Victim Rights Advocate, Ms. Jane Connors, and the UN Senior Human Rights Advisor, UNHCR, Ms. Li Feng, to also come onto the stage. And as they do, please give a round of applause to Balozi Caroline Vicini, the ambassador of Sweden, as she makes her remarks.
Good morning, fellow human beings. CS Kobia, all protocols observed. The 10th of December is always a festive day in Sweden. We have a tradition of having 10 to 12 days a year when it's mandatory to hoist the Swedish flag. And the 10th of December is one of those days. If you come to Stockholm, all the public buses have 2 Swedish flags in the front that are fluttering in the wind, reminding us of the importance of this day. Democracy is under threat globally. More people, 2/3 of the global citizens, live in electoral or closed autocracies. The level of democracy enjoyed by the average global citizen in 2020 was down to levels found around 1990. We see backsliding everywhere in Asia, Eastern Europe, Latin America, and also in Africa. And the autocratization wave has further been exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. So what does this mean to us? It means that we are actually drifting away from Article 1 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. This is my favorite article. That's the base that we have to go back to every day in the interaction with our fellow human beings. It means that the global citizens today are less free and less equal in dignity and rights. It means that fewer people live in societies where they can freely speak their mind, they cannot protest any wrongdoings, or they cannot take their case to court. It means that fewer women can choose how to live their lives and make decisions on their own bodies. It means that more journalists and human rights defenders are being threatened, beaten, they disappear, or they fall victims of extrajudicial killings. It means that the citizens have less influence of the distribution of resources and power. It means that a small group of people, a very small group of people, are taking advantage of their privileges and fill their barns while others go hungry. Allow me to change focus for a minute when it comes to hunger. Kenya is in this minute responding to a devastating drought in the north. Wells have dried up, millions of livestock are dead, and people's livelihoods have vanished. You might wonder how this is connected to the main theme of this morning. If equality and dignity and the rights for all to enjoy the same opportunities, the very basic foundation for equality, is immediately withdrawn in the same second as a serious drought or climate disaster hits the ground. And this can take years or even an entire lifetime to build back that dignity and those opportunities. By not including adaptation to climate change and loss of ecosystems and biodiversity in the human rights agenda, one risks to shoot oneself in the foot. Healthy ecosystems are the key for enjoying a broad range of human rights, including those for food, water, and health. In turn, exercising human rights, such as public participation and access to information, can foster a stronger action for conservation and the sustainable use of biodiversity and ecosystems. People in rural areas who directly depend on biodiversity for their survival are exceptionally vulnerable to limitations in access to biodiversity and biodiversity loss. And understanding and acting upon the synergies between climate change, biodiversity, and human rights can play a key role in the transformation that we want to see now, that is required for sustainability in line with the 2030 agenda, including achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. Sweden, along with many others here today, and I would particularly turn to Ambassador Geiger, who heads the proud community of the European Union, where human rights and democracy is actually the foundation, and in our quest for peace. We are convinced that democracy is the best foundation for a sustainable society. A democratic, inclusive, and equal society gives everyone the best opportunities to achieve their full potential and to contribute to and participate in a sustainable society. We all, as citizens, representatives of organizations or countries, have to support, defend, and choose democracy every day. Sweden is very firm in this choice. Our feminist foreign policy and drive for democracy are clear, and they set the tone for our foreign relations and our development action. The freedom to choose, speak, think, and love can never be taken for granted anywhere. The same applies to people's rights to exercise influence, to vote, and be treated equally under the law. It's all interconnected, the human rights, the democracy, and the rule of law. Let's all here today stand together and choose democracy. Thank you very much.
Indeed, thank you very much for those remarks. Allow me to invite onto the stage now Ms. Anna Mutawati, the UN Women Country Representative.
Thank you very much, our Director of Ceremonies, Cabinet Secretary, CS Kobia, Excellencies, Ambassadors, joining us today, the Vice Chancellor of the University of Nairobi, and our host today, colleagues from the UN, distinguished guests, good morning. It is a great pleasure that I join this commemoration of this year's Human Rights Day under the theme Equality, Reducing Inequalities, Advancing Human Rights. The day crowns the end of the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. And this year, 2021, marks 30 years of commemorating 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. So I think it already says a lot that we have been commemorating the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence for the past 30 years and still going. This signifies that violence against women is the most pervasive breach of human rights worldwide. Gender-based violence has been described as an unrelenting assault on human dignity, depriving people of their human rights and freedoms. The UN regards violence against women as one of the most significant violations of women's rights across the world, affecting women of all ages and social backgrounds. The statistics that are available globally, regionally, and nationally are staggering. Globally, an estimated 736 million women, almost 1 in every 3 women globally, have been subjected to intimate partner violence, non-partner sexual violence, or both at least once in their lifetime. Calls to helplines have increased 5-fold in some countries, including here in Kenya, as rates of reported intimate partner violence increased during at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. Restricted movement, social isolation, and economic insecurity are increasing women's vulnerability to violence in the home around the world. Ladies and gentlemen, globally, data shows that 137 women are killed every day. So let me just take that again. Globally, on every single day, an average of 137 women are killed by a member of their family, including current or former intimate partners. School-related gender-based violence is also a major obstacle to universal schooling and the right to education for girls. Globally, more than 47 million girls will not return to school because of teenage pregnancy. Here in Kenya, the numbers are not looking up either, with the global report on the shadow pandemic indicating that 80% of women reported that they or a woman that they know have experienced a form of violence since COVID-19 began. So 80% of women that were interviewed in Kenya reported that either themselves or somebody that they know, a woman that they knew or that they know, have experienced one form or another of violence since the COVID-19 pandemic began. So these statistics tell a story, and not a beautiful story at that. They demand that we look closely to understand the root causes of these violations and address the problem at source. Ladies and gentlemen, GBV is a result of gender inequality and lack of respect for human rights. It follows, therefore, that ending GBV requires that we acknowledge gender inequality as a human rights violation, which we should address with the same agency that we apply to all other human rights violations. Only then can we start to fully work towards a more equal and just society where women and girls are treated with dignity and respect. Acknowledging GBV as a human rights violation is a recognition that women are not exposed to violence by accident or because of an inborn vulnerability. No. Instead, GBV is the result of structural, systemic, deep-rooted discrimination, which the state has an obligation to urgently address. Ladies and gentlemen, Government of Kenya demonstrated its leadership in ending gender-based violence at the Generation Equality Forum, which was held in June 2021 in Paris. The Government of Kenya is a global action coalition leader, co-leader on ending gender-based violence. At the national level, Government of Kenya has made 12 concrete commitments to end gender-based violence and female genital mutilation by the year 2026. These commitments target all priority areas, including strengthening legislation, accountability for implementation of that legislation, financing, data availability, and directly increasing services to GBV survivors. We applaud this commitment and unambiguous leadership on the part of the Government of Kenya. As I conclude, the full implementation and realization of these commitments by Government of Kenya will go a long way towards ending gender-based violence and consequently achieving gender equality and overall equality for all. For we cannot talk about equality in any shape or sense or size as long as women and girls are perpetually exposed to human rights violations and gender-based discrimination. I thank you.
Thank you very much. I never cease to underscore that statement. Look around. Look around. It's an actual action. Look around. I invite you to look around now, because in this room, if you are not the one who has experienced SGBV as a woman, it's probably the person sitting next to you. Look around, gentlemen. If you are not the one who is perpetuating it, it is someone who is near you. That's just the harsh reality. That's what we're up against. I want to invite onto the stage to make her remarks the UN Victims' Rights Advocate, Ms. Jane Connors.
A lot of things to take off and put on. Madam Moderator, Excellencies, friends, colleagues, both in the room, outside the room, online. I'm delighted to be with you on this important day, and I hope everything is well with you and with your families. I'm privileged to be amongst such distinguished speakers, and I'm really looking forward to the remarks of Her Excellency Professor Margaret Kobia. I'm really excited. Being here today is very special for me, as in 1985, I spent many happy hours on this campus as I participated as part of the Commonwealth Secretariat delegation in the NGO Forum, which was held parallel to the World Conference on Women, hosted by the government of Kenya here in Nairobi. The conference and the forum were life-changing for me and for many women and girls who were there with me, and many came from all over Kenya. It is said that women came on donkeys to see what was going on, what the excitement was about. Both events opened our eyes to the many violations experienced by women and paved the way for the 1993 World Conference on Human Rights, where women's rights were firmly declared to be an integral part of human rights. It's remarkable it took so long. We are now all familiar with the phrase, women's rights are human rights. We've come a long way since then, much as the result of the powerful force of civil society, which has championed the human rights of all, especially those who are the most marginalized, or in the words of the SDGs, left behind. We have a complex web of human rights standards set out in 9 core human rights treaties, powerful oversight mechanisms, including the Human Rights Treaty bodies and the Human Rights Council's special procedures, as well as the Council itself. Human rights are scrutinized, routinely mainstreamed across the United Nations frameworks and have gained even greater prominence through the Secretary General's call to action for human rights. States respect, or some mightn't, but most states say they respect and implement these standards, and civil society uses them to hold governments to account. My mandate as the victims' rights advocate for those affected by sexual exploitation or abuse by United Nations personnel and people we work with is grounded in the human rights framework and reflects the commitment of the Secretary General to preventing these wrongs and acting robustly if they occur. In my work, I promote the rights and dignity of victims of these harms through underlining their entitlement to support and assistance and accountability. I also emphasize the importance of listening to them and hearing them, hearing their views and opinions, so our actions respond properly to their needs. I've been in Kenya now for 2 weeks, or almost 2 weeks. Unfortunately, I'm leaving this evening. I wish I could have stayed longer. And I've been struck by the commitment of UN entities, civil society, and indeed the government to realize the rights of the women, girls, men, and boys who have experienced these harms at the hands of our people. We've seen great progress in human rights since I was at the forum all those years ago, but we've got much more to do. And I chose to be a bit more upbeat than many of the speakers. One of the things we really have to do is combat harmful practices such as early marriage, a violation in itself, but also a driver of other violations. And my colleague from UN Women has spoken eloquently about the other violations that stem from early marriage. Finally, let me encourage us all to tap into the energy of young people. I was very excited to hear the singing this morning, young people, their energy, their vibrancy, and the resilience of survivors of human rights violations. With their support, we will continue to go forward with determination and achieve a world wherein everyone enjoys their human rights. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Connors. Allow me to invite to come onto the stage the Senior State Counsel, Ms. Clarice Kariuki, representing the Office of the Attorney General and Department of Justice, and also the UN Resident Coordinator in Kenya, Dr. Stephen Jackson, and to make her remarks, or to read the statement of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. Allow me to invite to the microphone the UN Senior Human Rights Advisor and Ms. Li Feng.
Greetings. Honourable Cabinet Secretary Professor Margaret Cobier, Excellencies and distinguished representatives of diplomatic missions, distinguished representatives from government partners from the Attorney General's Office, from the National Police Service, including the Internal Affairs Unit, from the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, and from independent institutions, including independent institutions and offices, including the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, IPOA, and the National Gender and Equality Commission. The UN Victims' Rights Advocate, Resident Coordinator, and UN colleagues, and partners and comrades from civil society and the human rights movement. It truly is a pleasure to be with you all here today to celebrate Human Rights Day together and to stand up for human rights and for a more equal, fairer, and inclusive world and societies. And as my colleague Anna Musavati said, gender equality and women's human rights is central to this vision, and it is really a pleasure that we are also able to mark the end of the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. I am going to deliver the statement of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Ms. Michelle Bachelet. The past 2 years have painfully demonstrated the intolerable cost of soaring inequalities. Equality is at the heart of human rights. That doesn't mean we must all look the same, think the same, or act the same. Quite the opposite. It means that we embrace our diversity and demand that all be treated without any kind of discrimination. That no matter who we are, who we love, or where we live, we have equal opportunities to live in dignity and to pursue our dreams. That from the moment we are born, anywhere on this planet, we have the same rights to life, health, and education, to speak our minds without fear, to enjoy our days in a healthy environment. All of us. Equality is about empathy and solidarity, about understanding that as a common humanity, our only way forward is to work together for the common good. But the inequalities inflamed by COVID-19 are pushing us backwards. It's about time we push back and bring them down. On this Human Rights Day, I invite you to join me in lending your name and your efforts to equality so that we can recover better, fairer, and greener from this crisis, so that we can rebuild societies that are more resilient and sustainable, and so that we can stand up for human rights for all. Asanteni sana.
Thank you very much, Ms. Li Feng. I'll change the order a little bit and ask now that we hear the remarks of the Senior State Counsel from the Office of the Attorney General and Department of Justice, Ms. Clarice Kariuki. A round of applause as she comes up, please.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Professor Margaret Cobier, Cabinet Secretary, Ministry of Public Service, Gender, Senior Citizen Affairs and Special Programs. Professor Kiama, the Vice Chancellor, University of Nairobi. Excellencies, the Honorable Ambassadors in the room. Representatives from government agencies, national human rights institutions, civil society organizations, and the media fraternity. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. Good morning. Allow me to convey the greetings and apologies of our Attorney General, Honorable Kihara Kariuki, who could not be with us this day. I will be delivering his remarks. It gives me great pleasure to be here with you all today to celebrate the 73rd anniversary of the Universal Declaration on Human Rights. When the world adopted this instrument in 1948, they acknowledged that human rights were not simply a privilege for a select few, but rather that every human being deserves to be treated with dignity, regardless of his or her standing in society. This year's theme on equality is anchored in Article 10 of our Constitution that highlights human dignity, equity, inclusiveness, equality, human rights, non-discrimination, and protection of the marginalized as our core national values and principles of governance. The founders of the United Nations were right when they stated that lasting global peace and security cannot be achieved without respect for human rights. Ladies and gentlemen, with the COVID-19 pandemic exacerbating inequalities, it is even more prudent to put in place measures to safeguard the future of tomorrow's society. Almost 60% of Africa's population is under the age of 25, making Africa the world's youngest continent. The pandemic and its social economic effects have had long-lasting and multidimensional impacts on millions of young people. Unless their rights are protected, including through the provision of decent jobs and social protection, they run the risk of falling prey to the detrimental effects of mounting inequality and poverty. As COVID-19 recovery programs are conceived, they need to take into account the participation and the views of the communities within which they envision operating. These policies ought to be people-centric, disaggregated into factors such as age and gender, as well as to be considerate of the marginalized and the indigenous communities who are often the worst hit in the face of disasters and pandemics. Equality, inclusion, and non-discrimination, in other words, a human rights-based approach to development, is the best way to reduce these inequalities, to design recovery plans, and to resume our path towards the realization of the 2030 Agenda, as well as our Vision 2030. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to highlight 3 challenges that we have faced as a country in the quest to recover better from the aftermath of the pandemic, and the measures that our government has put in place to address these challenges to reduce inequalities in our society. The first challenge has been the rising cases of sexual gender-based violence. According to the National Crime and Research Center, in 2020 alone, cases of gender-based violence rose up to 92%. Globally, at least 1 in 5 women experiences gender-based violence. And in the midst of these alarming statistics, the government of Kenya remains committed to ensure that the rights of our women, girls, and even boys are protected. In October 2021, the Polycare policy was launched. This is the first ever policy document that provides for a police-integrated response to gender-based violence. The policy document is also in line with our generation equality commitments to accelerate progress towards gender equality and ending gender-based violence in Kenya by 2026. The second challenge has been the effects of the pandemic on the business environment. Due to the globalization and interconnectedness of the business world today, the measures taken by governments across the world to prevent the spread of the pandemic have resulted in minimal movement of people, goods, affecting business operations. The low economic environment has led to business failures, insolvency cases, debt and mortgage repayment default, and layoffs as well as redundancies. In the midst of all this, businesses are still required to respect human rights. The government of Kenya has developed a national action plan on business and human rights. Kenya is one of 2 African nations that has developed such a policy document. The National Action Plan seeks to comprehensively address and offer protection against human rights abuses by businesses, both state-owned and privately owned. It has domesticated the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights and has focused on 5 thematic issues, namely land and natural resources, labor rights, revenue transparency, environmental protection, and access to remedy. It outlines clear commitments by the government for addressing adverse business-related human rights impacts under these themes, and is oriented towards addressing actual and potential business and human rights challenges faced by both the government and businesses. Ladies and gentlemen, finally, the third challenge is on the digital divide that has been exacerbated by the pandemic. The pandemic has shed light on the inequalities in access to the internet and digital technologies across the globe. It has also been a timely reminder of the stark inequalities in internet access among the youth in our country. As more conversations, meetings, business deals, job vacancies move online and in multiple and more distant spaces, opportunities get closer to those with access to stable online connection, but further away for those on the other side of the digital gap. These are also those who are already disadvantaged because of intersecting divides related to their class, age, gender, or where they live. This is a structural program that will require serious investment in infrastructure, as well as more inclusive communication strategies by the government, as well as organizations to ensure information and opportunities are for everyone, not just a few. This year, the government of Kenya, through its Ministries of Education and ICT, has partnered with the UNICEF, Safaricom, and Nokia in a project aimed at providing 4G internet access to rural schools, as well as disadvantaged urban areas. Both the rural and disadvantaged peri-urban students have already benefited from this digital literacy initiative. And so far, 32,670 students have been connected to the internet. Ladies and gentlemen, as I conclude, I echo the words of the late Nelson Mandela. To deny people of their human rights is to deny their very humanity. Human rights have the power to streamline supply chains, to reduce the cost of doing business, to improve the work environment, to tackle the root causes of conflict and crisis, and to overall improve the quality of life by addressing grievances, eliminating inequalities and exclusion, and allowing people to participate in decision-making that affects their lives. It is therefore incumbent on all of us to do our part, individually as well as collectively, to realize equality, to reduce inequality, and to advance human rights. Thank you, and happy Human Rights Day.
Thank you very much. And while we are on the subject of connectivity, for all of you who are on social media, the hashtags to use are hashtag #AllEqual, the tag #RebuildFera, and hashtag #StandUp4, the number 4, human rights. So #AllEqual, RebuildFera, and #StandUp4, human rights. And please tag the CHR Kenya, Haki KNCHR Kenya, UN Kenya, and UN Human Rights. Now, to read the statement of the UN Secretary General, I want to invite onto the stage the UN Resident Coordinator in Kenya, Dr. Stephen Jackson, who will also invite onto the stage after his remarks the Honorable, the Cabinet Secretary, Ministry of Public Service. Dr. Jackson.
Hamjambo, marafiki. Haki iwe ngao na mlinzi. Listening to the beautiful rendition of the national anthem this morning, it occurred to me that you'd already done all of the work for us just by repeating those lines. Seaskobia, Excellencies, friends. Actually, it's really the beautiful language of Kiswahili that does the job for us, because, as you know, that line from the national anthem, Haki iwe ngao na mlinzi, is usually translated as justice be our shield and defender. But if you go to a dictionary and you look up the word Haki, and by the way, shout out to my sisters and brothers from Haki Africa. If you look up the word Haki, it can be translated as justice, it can be translated as fairness, it can be translated as rights, hence Haki Kenya. So the Kenyan national anthem already puts the theme of inequalities and rights slap bang together, as, by the way, does the Kenyan Constitution. We've heard many ways in which inequalities and rights intersect this morning. Let me add 5 more very quickly as I invite you to meditate on your own favorite intersection between inequalities and rights while I read the Secretary General's message. First of all, in October, His Excellency the President, President Kenyatta, presiding over the Security Council of the United Nations, made that link when he talked about the critical relationship between cohesion, inequality, and the production of conflict in any society. It was an amazing speech, well worth taking a look at. I had the great honor to be on a podium with him last week in Nakuru, along with Medin, to celebrate World AIDS Day, where the theme was inequalities and HIV, because in Kenya, as in many countries, the remaining new cases of HIV occur around deep pockets of inequality. Jane Connors and her delegation are with us today in Kenya to mark, as she so eloquently pointed out, and Anna also too, there you are, Anna, the relationship between gender inequality and rights through the prism of gender-based violence, female genital mutilation, but also sexual exploitation and abuse by our own United Nations staff. We in UN Kenya, under the banner of Leave No One Behind, are putting inequality front and center in everything that we do going forward for the next 4 years. And by the way, our sisters and brothers of the World Bank are doing likewise. And as you'll hear in a second, the Secretary General draws a very strong relationship between the inequalities of COVID and a deteriorating climate of human rights around the world. So, 3 quick takeaways. Number 1, the relationship between inequalities and human rights, that relationship is essential and fundamental to how we act. The second is that inequality is more on everyone's lips, I think, in 2021 than has been the case in a very long time. Economic inequality, social inequality, pandemic inequality, political inequality. And I venture to suggest that the fight against inequality is the fight of our day. And the third takeaway is to go back to the national hymn of Kenya, Haki iwe ngao na mlinzi, and to say that it's all there, and that it's all there in this visionary, progressive 2010 Constitution, if we can just live up to that ambition. So let me invite you to ponder on these things as I have the single honor now to read the statement of His Excellency the Secretary General for this Human Rights Day 2021. Our world is at a crossroads. The COVID-19 pandemic, the climate crisis, and the expansion of digital technology into all areas of our lives have created new threats to human rights. Exclusion and discrimination are rampant, public space is shrinking, poverty and hunger are rising for the first time in decades. Millions of children are missing out on their right to education. Inequality is deepening. But we can choose a different path. 73 years ago today, the United Nations General Assembly adopted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The principles set out in this simple declaration remain the key to realizing all human rights, civil, economic, cultural, social, and political, for all people everywhere. Recovery from the pandemic must be an opportunity to expand human rights and freedoms and to rebuild trust. Trust in the justice and impartiality of laws and institutions, confidence that a life of dignity is in reach. Faith that people can get a fair hearing and resolve their grievances peacefully. The United Nations stands for the rights of every member of our human family. Today and every day, we will continue to work for justice, equality, dignity, and human rights for all. Happy Human Rights Day. And Madam Moderator, thank you for lending to me the distinct honor now to welcome to the stage Her Excellency Waziri, Cabinet Secretary, Professor Margaret Kobia. Waziri, please join us. And as she does, let me just say a few things on the subject of Prof, as I like to call her, who is our super minister. Ever since the recent reshuffle, a minister who was a sister in the combat for human rights has become even more vital and central to the work of the United Nations, and I think to all of you in this room. So let me do a little bit the same as I did just before and highlight a few ways in which the work of CS brings together the theme of inequalities and human rights. First of all, she has the critical file of social protection. And Waziri, I think you sped here this morning, having been involved in a very important discussion on the social protection file, and of course, Kenya's ambition to reach universal health care, to ensure education and health as fundamental rights for all her citizens. Social protection is a vital element in that agenda, in reducing inequalities and promoting rights. Secondly, CS is also, as you know, the minister for the ASAL counties, the arid and semi-arid regions of this beloved country. And yesterday, we were together, and I had the privilege to watch as CS launched a really fundamental intervention to reinforce the rights that, Ambassador, you were talking about, that drought is a human rights issue. It's a climate rights issue. But Amartya Sen won the Nobel Prize in 1998 for saying something very simple. He said, famines don't occur when there's no food. Famines occur when people have no entitlement to the food that there is. And what you did yesterday, CS, in launching the digital platform for direct cash support to people suffering from drought around this country was to reinforce the human right to adequate nutrition and, just as importantly, to dignity. So I really want to salute you for that, CS. And then, of course, in all the spare time that you still have, you're the Cabinet Secretary for Gender, and we've heard so many eloquent testimonies this morning to how gender inequality is a fundamental and central dimension of the human rights challenge in the world. So, Waziri, I won't take any more of anybody else's time. We want to hear from you. So thank you so much for honoring us today, and may I welcome you to give your remarks.
Thank you for that warm welcome. Good morning, everyone. Dr. Stephen Jackson, United Nations Resident Coordinator, the Vice Chancellor, University of Nairobi, Professor Agitai Kiamba, representative of various constitutional commissions here, Excellencies, the ambassadors, members of the civil society, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very happy to be here, and I'm just going to read my keynote address. But before I read it, I just want first to say, I'm happy to be back here. I'm one of the own students who keeps coming back, and I'm happy to be back home. Recently, I know you launched Women Economic Empowerment Hub, and that persuades me every time something is in the University of Nairobi, I just want to come. Let me also say my keynote address is leaning too much towards one gender, that is women. And the reason why that is happening is because today we are also coming to the end of 16 days activism, which we have celebrated every year for 30 years, as you heard from the UN Women Director. Therefore, I was persuaded when I got this invitation from Dr. Jackson that while we are celebrating International Human Rights Day, I could also spend a little time. And as I was figuring out, I thought it can also lean towards women, and because especially gender-based violence, we have found that 90% of those who are affected by gender-based violence is more of women, and the men is about 10%. From perspective of governments, of course, you don't want any, both male and female, to undergo any inhuman kind of experience, especially on violence. Then the other reason which persuaded me, I know from very simple thinking that if women in every home, or if mom is happy, everybody is happy. Is that true? If mom is happy, everybody is happy. And I think that's a basic fact we should be working around. And if I have not persuaded you enough, why they should lean on more on that gender, I can also say that in a graduate class, if your supervisor keeps on arguing why your topic is on a certain area and maybe doesn't think that way, you can always hide in this study, my purpose was on this. So is the owner of your study. So in my case, being at the university here, I can argue, I was more leaning and persuaded to focus towards a keynote address which would support or promote gender equality, and especially on women. Therefore, as I read it, I am honored to join you today to celebrate the Human Rights Day 2021 under the theme, Reducing Inequalities and Advancing Human Rights. This particular theme underpins the principles of human rights that are well captured in our Constitution of Kenya. I take this opportunity also to thank the United Nations office in Nairobi for convening this celebration. I commend all the actors in this room, including the civil society, who strive most of the time to fulfill the promise of dignity, equality, justice, enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It is your consistent action on the ground that breathes life into the declaration and it makes rights a reality to many people. Ladies and gentlemen, Human Rights Day comes at the right time at the end of 16 days of activism against gender-based violence, providing a crucial context that affirms the truth that says human is not truly free until women are free. Free from violence, exclusion, discrimination, and free from poverty. Further, the impact of COVID-19 pandemic has brought a setback to gender equality journey. Without gender equality, we cannot achieve sustainable development goals. I am persuaded, unless we have really gender equality, you cannot have a half of your team outside and expect to score. Therefore, it is important that we must break all barriers to gender equality. Ladies and gentlemen, Kenya's commitment to gender equality is undeterred. The principles of Universal Declaration of Human Rights are domesticated in the provisions of our progressive constitution that provided robustly for basic human rights as well as social, economic rights. The Kenyan Constitution states that every person is equal before the law and shall enjoy equal protection by law. Let me point out that is the Constitution. And Kenya, as you have heard from various other speakers, has done very well in the areas of gender equality, in the areas of human rights, but the journey is still to be won. And I think that's why we are here today, to build concurrence on what remains to be done while recognizing the gain. Independent Constitution Commission backstop Kenya's commitment on human rights. These commissions include Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, Commission on Administrative Justice, and the National Gender and Equality Commission, all which promote human rights and protect the observance of human rights and as fundamental freedom in all spheres of life. My ministry now responsible for children, senior citizens, women, persons living with disability. In this regard, the government deploys policy and programmatic intervention to advance the political, social, and economic rights to all, including providing emergency support to survivors of gender-based violence through online counseling, several live toll-free lines, including what the effort is going on with polycare, I think which you are all aware, and also supporting medical and legal services and safe spaces. The ministry has also established about 8 gender-based shelters and also gender-based violence recovery centers in all the 5 hospitals across the country. The provision of practice of genital female nutrition through the Female Genital Mutilation Act 2011 has gone a long way in stemming the practice in Kenya. Now, there has been a steady long-term decline in the rates of FGM since the 1980s, and now we stand at 21% nationally. To advance economic rights of women, the government continues to upscale efforts to place affirmative financial resources in the hands of women, youth, and the people living with disability, because we are very clear who is the enemy. I think the enemy of human rights is poverty. Ladies and gentlemen, in advancing the rights of women going forward, I wish to highlight 3 areas which I believe require attention and action from this conference. 1, you cannot prevent what you do not see. What do I mean? Up-to-date data on gender-based violence is not always available. Similarly, day-to-day violation of women, for example, domestic violence that result in bodily harm or death, are not reported as gender-based violence rather than assault and murder, and also remembering the stigma around the reporting. This prevents actors from seeing a clear picture of what is happening. Women are not identified as specific group at risk, and the violence against women is not articulated in law as specific type of violence requiring specific solution. Research has shown that countries with the full specific laws prohibiting violence against women experience better enforcement on gender violence laws, score higher on the UN Gender Development Index, and score higher on the UN Gender Empowerment Measure. 2, opportunity for women to make laws for women. You have heard the man of law. Most of the laws seem to be more man reading, so we are here kind of campaigning for opportunity for women to make laws for women. Research shows that all else equal, countries that have a higher share of women parliamentarians are more likely to pass comprehensive laws on sexual harassment, rape, divorce, and domestic violence. In addition, women registrators are more likely to introduce legislation that specifically benefits women. These findings would be corroborated by Kenyan experience, where most laws are advancing to rights of women, including Sexual Offences Act, the Prohibition of FGM Act, the Children Act, among others, were all initiated and championed by women in parliament. Having more women in decision-making is therefore directly linked to the enjoyment of fundamental rights and the freedom of women. I can imagine women voting for increments of budget where it concerns provision of water. I can also imagine women in parliament championing health issues in parliament. 3, protect women human rights defender. Human rights defenders are to high rights to human rights what teachers have to education. According to Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, a particular section of human rights defender comprising of women are facing additional risk due to gender-specific violence brought on them because of what they are doing. Therefore, women rights defenders are at risk of domestic abuse related to their activism, where activism is seen as unacceptable, inappropriate, and also unfeminine. Human rights defenders are a critical group of more often than not, it is running or working in human rights organizations that act as first responders to cases of gender-based violence. Therefore, there is need for enhanced awareness to the politicians, community members, state agencies, the society, the important role of women human rights defenders in promoting human rights. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, I wish to emphasize the commitment of the government of Kenya to safeguard all human rights, and they pay special attention to the protection of women and girls so that they may fully enjoy their fundamental rights and rise to their full potential. Enhancing partnership and collaboration with all stakeholders in this room holds the promise to a right-based society. Finally, I thank the United Nations for today's fruitful conference and look forward to implementing of the recommendation we are going to make today. I thank the University of Nairobi leadership, led by the Vice Chancellor who is with us here, for hosting this event, and I believe that you will find research questions for further investigation on this topic of human rights and gender-based violence. I thank you.
Good. That seems to be working now. CS, thank you so much for that vision of a Kenya founded in rights and equality of women and men, but along many other important dimensions as well. We're going to liven things and speed things up now by moving to a panel discussion. And I'm happy to say that we've got a very, very interesting and expert and experienced panel to be with us. And I'm going to invite them to join me and CS on stage. And I'd be very grateful if they could do so in the following order, since we haven't had a chance to meet yet. So it'd be, that would be a very good way of us doing so. So we have Mr. Paul Kuria, who is the Director of Programs and Research with the National Gender Equality Commission. So Paul is coming up, and Paul, if you would take your seat over to my extreme left here. We have Ms. Jane Meriwas, and she's Executive Director of the Samburu Women's Trust. She's a community development practitioner of deep experience, more than 15 years advancing women's and girls' rights amongst indigenous communities. So Jane, if you take your seat there, that would be super. Anami Daudi, who was born and raised in Mukura Kwanjenga informal settlement here in Nairobi, and he's a youth leader, community organizer, social justice activist, and co-founder of the Mukuru Community Justice Center. Please, Anami, excuse me. We have Mildred Omino, who is the Disability Liaison Officer at the University of Nairobi, a member of the Kenya Network advocating for the rights of girls and women with disabilities. And she runs a blog dubbed Diversity in Ability, and that has content on gender, disability, and development. She's an alumnus of the Feminist Leadership Movement Building and Rights Institute in East Africa and Disability Sexuality Rights Online. Mildred, you're very welcome. Ryan Muiruri, who is the founder and program director of the Intersex Persons Society of Kenya. Ryan has been leading advocacy for the protection of the rights of all children born intersex in Kenya, regionally and globally, and is currently a member of the government's Intersex Implementation Coordination Committee. Ryan, you're very, very welcome. And we have Naima Ibrahim, the last member of the panel, who is representing the CEO of the Nubian Rights Forum, but she's herself a very active member and human rights defender within the Nubian Human Rights Forum, who've been at the forefront for the struggle for the recognition of the Nubian community, and that resulted, Naima, I believe, in the award of the Kibra Nubian Community Land title of 288 acres by President Uhuru Kenyatta in 2016. So as I hope you can see, friends, we have a panel that really represents many of the different axes of diversity and therefore the challenges and the opportunities of inclusion. Friends, as I say, we're going to try and make this as lively as we can, so I'm going to be quite ruthless with you, obliging you to give me very short replies to my initial questions, because I want us to have plenty of time to dialogue together. So if you can really, 1 minute, a couple of sentences as you pitch off. And Paul, I'm going to start with you because you're the one member of the panel that we've invited to speak really more from an institutional perspective. So perhaps I could begin by asking you in 1 minute just to address the work of the Commission in addressing the relationship between inequalities and human rights.
Thank you so much, moderator. The National Gender Equality Commission is a constitutional commission that is established to promote gender equality and freedom from discrimination. And this is done through protecting the rights of 6 vulnerable populations that includes the children, the minority and the marginalized, the persons with disabilities, the older members of the society where all of us are heading to. These are persons who have attained the age of 60 years and above, and the youth as well as many other emerging populations within our country, whether you're talking about children who are living with incarcerated mothers in prisons, or you're talking about the refugees, or you're talking about other populations that could be on the streets and the like. Now, the Commission has been working largely on looking into the laws, regulations, and policies. As Professor has mentioned this morning, you'll find that legal instruments are the silent drivers of inequalities, and we work with the members of parliament. Every year we review not less than 50 laws at the national level, Senate and the National Assembly as well as the county assemblies, to ensure that we look at the language. It has to be very sensitive, very specific, and very responsive to the needs of the various special interest groups that we have talked about. And otherwise, if you leave it to them, then sometimes you'll find certain provisions and certain clauses that are discriminatory and that perpetuates the abuse of the human rights. Other areas that we look at is the financing, and particularly financing programs that are going to close the gaps, the inequalities, the gender gaps, for example. So the economic stimuli, for instance, where the executive did issue a lot of resources, not quite a lot, but some resources to really caution populations against COVID-19. You'd be there to look at how much of those resources would be dedicated to the vulnerable populations, to the special interest groups. And I can talk about much more in a short while. Thanks so much.
Thank you, and thank you so much for modeling the economy of an intervention. Very, very interesting that you list the 6 groups. It'd be fun to see how much the different panelists see themselves reflected in those populations. Also, your points about both resourcing and then legal instruments. I was very struck by that phrase of legal instruments as silent drivers. So perhaps, Jane, I can come to you next and ask you, just first of all, to give us a couple of minutes of reflection on your own experience, personal experience, if you're willing, of marginalization and that in relationship to human rights.
Thank you so much, moderator, for giving us the opportunity. When you talk around issues on marginalization coming from indigenous communities, of course the government has tried much to bring on board law according to the Constitution, but the problem, some of those law is implementation. That is where the gap. And as much as my colleague from the commission has just said that they're also looking keenly, text what is going in those policies that are being developed. So when you look where I come from, yes, law are there, so implementation is a challenge. And even reaching to those interior communities, it becomes also difficult because if the law is there and there is no mass civic education or even information to reach those communities which the law intended to protect, then it remains that the law is not there. And that is what is happening in Kenya. We have very good law, but to domesticate that, communities can reach and they can understand. And that is now where the gap is when you talk around issues on human rights. When you talk human rights, it should be equal to everybody. As Kenyan, we should be equal. But when you look very keenly, in Kenya, we are not equal. There are parts that they are better than others, but where we come from in terms of development, in terms of healthy facility, in terms even access children to school, it's not equal. Some areas have been left around. As much as we have the devolved counties that they are there to bring the gap, but there is still a huge gap to be done. So we are talking about inequality around issues on discrimination. These are some of the issues that we need to discuss. How do we bridge those gaps so that all of us work in the same spirit of saying that all of us are equal, but equal with dignity. Lastly, when you talk around issues on COVID-19, it's worse to where we come from. The information which the government was packing, mostly in urban center, yes, you have TV, it's accessible, you can able to get masks, but where we come from, with the curfew which the government had put in place, it even became worse, and more violence to women and girls, and even to the general community, because if we could not even access to the market, which were close to get this mask. See, if you are violated, you cannot even report to the police. When you report, first of all, you're put to jail because you didn't follow the COVID rule. So that one even became more worse to women. And even the curfew, when it reached at 10, or even sometimes it was around 7, where it came from because of insecurity, this was putting more risk to women. Majority of them, you could sleep where the dark was reaching you. So these are some of the issues that even COVID-19 was more, and worse even to the young girls. When you look, I think this year when you're doing class 8, these girls who are doing class 8, the rate of girls dropout and early teen pregnancy, I'm sure where a problem of pastoral is taking girls to school, prevalence is boy to a girl child. The COVID-19 has even become it worse. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I think you've really highlighted, first of all, the challenge, the gap between the beautiful vision of a constitution like Kenya's and its legal framework and then implementation. And also what it's become fashionable to call intersectionality, the relationship between different kinds and the mutually reinforcing nature of different kinds of marginalization and vulnerability that really lead to a deprivation of rights. So thank you for making that very, very concrete. And I'm tempted.
Give you that one. We're going to do
the switcheroo. Anami, to ask you something of the same question, speaking as someone coming from an urban informal settlement, how do different kinds of inequality reinforce themselves in your daily experience, and how do they lead to a loss of rights?
Yeah, first and foremost, I would like to say thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you.
I want to say on behalf of Mukuru community, we have been experiencing inequalities. For the past 1 month, the government demolished over 1,000 households. And for now, we have like 100,000 people who are rendered homeless, who are sleeping outside. 20 people have died so far. And there's no one who's talking about this. Also, the media is in darkness. They're not airing about this issue. And all about the human rights violation, because you cannot come with bulldozers and bulldoze over 100,000 households without even prior notice or maybe alternative solution for those people who are living there. So this are a gross of human rights violation, and also is part of the inequalities that Kenyans face daily to daily in urban informal settlements. And also to talk about access to basic needs, like maybe basic needs and also basic facilities like hospitals. We have hospitals that maybe were constructed by Nairobi Metropolitan Services, but for now, the hospitals are not functional. They don't have medicines. Whenever you go there, people are dying in our hospitals. We can't access such services, just a basic service. And also access to clean and safe water. Article 43 of the Constitution of Kenya should be implemented, because some of these basic needs lie in line in our Constitution in Article 43 for social and economic rights. But it seems that there's a loophole. We have, like one of the colleagues has just mentioned, we have good policies, we have everything, and now we can see the crisis that we have. People are not being engaged and also being part of decision making, and also being part of implementation process to come up with a solution. I'm glad that we have also community members who are trying to organize in different social justice centers in each and informal settlement to try and come up with solution, and also to hold leaders accountable. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Please do pass it on to Mildred. And the work of the social justice centers, I think, is absolutely on the front line. I had the privilege of visiting one in a different neighborhood from your own. But also on the question of the demolitions, we'll share with you that one of the most bizarre days I've had since coming back to Kenya earlier this year was at an embassy party. Wasn't their fault, but an embassy party for a national day, where we were all gathered to drink a glass of champagne in honor of the independence of that country. And the residents looked onto an informal urban settlement where, right in front of our eyes, tear gas was being used and the bulldozers were coming in to demolish houses. I mean, it was just a juxtaposition that I couldn't even imagine in my worst nightmares. And watching that unfolding and being there to celebrate some form of independence seemed to me to be just an extraordinary, an abomination. So thank you for sharing that with us, and we'll come back to some of the themes that you raised. So Mildred, can I come to you? And I'm tempted to ask you, as a blogger, how you use that tool to bring to light your own experience and other members of the community of those living with disability. How do you bring to light your own experience of both marginalization, but I imagine also of opportunity?
Okay. Thank you very much for the opportunity and the platform to discuss these critical issues around discrimination and inequality from the perspective of persons with disability. So first, I would want to appreciate the gains that we've made as a country in terms of reducing inequalities among persons with disability. Our constitution is very clear in terms of outlawing discrimination on basis of gender, race, religion, disability, or any other parameter. Then also to appreciate that Kenya has also ratified the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disability. It's 15 years now, and we've seen the fruits of these legal provisions and the policy framework. However, we also have gaps. So for me, it's critical that we create awareness that as a country, we've made progress. We are not where we were, where discrimination was quite high, inequalities were high, and disability was highly stigmatized. So we are making headways. But then on a quick reflection on COVID-19 pandemic, which disrupted the lives of everyone, including persons with disability, it was a moment to rethink the whole issue of inequalities, discrimination, and how we are prepared as a nation to support everyone in point of crisis. One thing that happened was the closure of schools. Everybody went home, learning stopped, and curfews were enforced. And for people with disability, there were things that were quick to happen to them. For example, the containment measures of COVID-19. Everyone was advised to adhere to social distancing. But what does this mean to a person who is blind and is totally dependent on a guide, for example? And police were chasing people around at night. What about a deaf person who cannot say that, hey, I'm coming from a shop to get medicine? Then health sector, every health worker was pushed to deal with COVID-19. But there are people with disability who are dependent on healthcare, people who live on oxygen 24 hours, people who required corrective surgeries. So at that time, there was also disruption of healthcare. So for me, when I write articles, I highlight these stories. What does this mean to us so that we can reach to many people who might not be, we might not be able to reach out to like physically. Then talking about digital divide that has been addressed here. As a university, we are grateful that University of Nairobi was the first university to take up online learning. And this is a positive measure for people with disability. Thinking of a candidate who is supposed to, for example, defend a project or a thesis, and it requires that you be physically present in maybe 4th floor of Gandhi Wing. For the first time, candidates were able to defend their theses from their rooms. For people with physical disability, this is a plus. So in a nutshell, the pandemic reminded us of the opportunities that we have to advance accessibility and simplify processes for people with disability. Another example would be like recruitment. For a very long time, employers have been insisting that people have to physically be present for interviews. The pandemic also enabled this feature that actually people can be recruited virtually. So as we lament about the pandemic, but it also taught us to rethink how our systems and processes can be more inclusive to people with disability. So those who were recruited during the pandemic virtually, if they had wheelchairs, for example, the issue of a venue being inaccessible was sorted because they needed to only log into the link and be recruited and get justice as well. So we need to rethink the lessons that the COVID-19 has taught us, to pick on the positive aspects, but also to deal with the digital divide issues, that it's not only the absence of 4G network, but also what's the cost of devices, assistive devices, for example, for our students in higher learning institution who need a note taker simply because they cannot write notes in a lecture hall. So one note taker goes for 600,000 shillings. If you tell any parent, they will tell you those are like 2 cars or a plot of land. So that is what a blind student needs to take notes in a class. So probably going forward, we need to start thinking as a country, how do we enable learning institutions to access these gadgets that are really basic. You know, a note taker is not like a car, for example. It's an essential item for a blind student to learn in class. How can governments think about making inclusive education a reality so that even if you are a person with disability and you are experiencing these challenges, you can comfortably acquire higher education and get to employment, because if we can't get education, then we cannot get employment. And if we cannot collaborate to address disability-specific challenges, also we will still leave many people behind. So for blogging, we need to raise these issues and share with the masses on the reality. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Hold on to the microphone there, because we have a, no, you can hold on to it, I think, because I think you have one there. And so that way we'll be sorted. Thank you for reminding us that COVID has been, yes, deleterious for human rights overall, but also a disruptor, actually revealing the contours of particular kinds of marginalization and therefore identifying the opportunities to deal with them. So it hasn't been, we say in Irish, it's an ill wind that doesn't blow some good. And I think that COVID has been that in many ways. So thank you for that. Ryan, can I come to you and ask you to speak to us from your particular position? How do you feel that the relationship between inequality and human rights has worked out in your own life and in the lives of those that are members of your community?
Thank you so much. Despite Kenya being the first country to count intersex as the third sex category in 2018 census, intersex persons still face discrimination and equality that start immediately after we are born. First of all, when you are born, and no one can tell, maybe if you are a baby girl or a baby boy, they start, or the norm that we have believed this is an outcast child. So that's when they start, because the parent may leave you and abandon you, either both or one of them. And led to many intersex persons brought up in a single-headed families, or maybe on a street because no one is there to take care of them. And sometimes because of that, our able doctors intend to do unnecessary surgeries to make us fit in the two binaries that we have, so that you can have the birth certificate, birth notification, and other documentation, which we end up lacking, or when we have the conflicting documents. And you know, when you lack a birth notification, that tells you not get a birth certificate, an ID, passport, or even the certificate, because you can never die if you never existed. Education for intersex persons, it ends up to be just a dream, because many parents don't believe in investing in outcast child. And maybe when you are taken to school, the conducive is no longer, the environment is no longer conducive for you to be in school, and you end up dropping like myself. And if maybe you were lucky enough to get to maybe the secondary level of education, you'll find there is no space for you, since we have boys and girls schools. So you find there is no space for you. And due to that, you find like it's very hard for an intersex person to get a white-collar job, because we don't have education. We are brought up as an outcast. So even when the COVID came, you find that many intersex persons work as domestic workers. And this time, the issue of stay at home or work at home. Now their services were no longer needed because people are working from home, they can do their services. So we find it was very hard for intersex person even to afford even masks and sanitizers. And many of them were left with even nowhere to stay because their parent had abandoned them. So they were staying with their employers. And because of these employers taking advantage of them, they are even underpaid because of they are desperate for work or they are desperate for space to stay. So they are even underpaid. So you find when your service is no longer needed, you cannot even afford to get even food or other basic needs.
So again, you've given us an extraordinary and very visceral image of this sort of cascade of consequences, a particular kind of inequality that results in just more and deeper inequality. And I think you've very eloquently pointed out that Kenya should be praised for being amongst the first countries in the world to recognize intersex as a separate category. I mean, it'll be a long time, I think, before that happens in my home country, for example. And yet that's the beginning of the journey. It's not even remotely close to the end of the journey. So thank you for that. That was very powerful. Naima, can I come to you lastly and ask you really the same question that I asked Ryan? From the perspective of your own experience, what's been that dance between inequality and human rights for you and your community? And by the way, is there a sound engineer who can get rid of, I spoke about an ill wind blowing no good, but there is an ill wind on the sound system. I can hear sort of, is there anything we can do about that? Not sure if that one's working. Want to try this one? I don't know what that scratchy noise is, but if we can get rid of it, that would be great.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. My name is Naima Ibrahim. I work with Nubian Rights Forum, which is a community-based organization in Kibra, Nairobi. I am a member of the Nubian community. So everybody else could actually go and apply for the ID card, except the Nubian child. And we were concerned as an organization, how come all these other tribes can apply for their IDs and we can't? So we had to draft a letter to the director of the National Registration Bureau, and that is what prompted the local NRB officers in Kibra to actually give vetting dates for the Nubian community. So with regard to discrimination and equality, I feel like the Nubian community or the Nubian child has faced so many challenges with regard to accessing the ID card and all other services or all other opportunities, including social, political, and economic rights that are tied to having an ID card. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and I'm is that me? We're not sure. I'm sorry we're having some sound problems, but again, extraordinarily moving. If I imagine my own daughter being faced with a question like that in school, it just blows my mind. So thank you for sharing that with us. Impossible to summarize, but I am going to try. And as I do, let me put everybody on notice then. We want to bring this to a close in about 10 minutes. So I'm going to give each of you a chance, when we go around one more time, to name the one action that you'd like all of us to consider taking as we go out of this meeting today. What would be the one action that we could do that would make a difference for you and your communities, their equality and their rights? It's a really tough question, I know, and I'm not going to do it in the rote order. I'm going to jump around a bit. So, Anami, I'm sorry, in a second I'm going to come to you first for the one thing we should do. So while you're preparing your thoughts about how to respond to that impossible challenge, a 3-point summary. I think all of you in different ways have noted some progress, whether it's at the level of your organizing to defend yourselves, as you've done in the Social Justice Center, you've done in your communities across the panel. But that progress is clearly not enough. That's the first point. The second point I think we've really heard illustrated today, friends, is that one inequality begets and deepens and reinforces another inequality. So this is what we call intersectionality. COVID arrived on top of that, but you were already experiencing nested kinds of inequality. The digital divide impacting on people living with disability, for it, just to take one example. So inequalities that beget and reinforce other inequalities and deepen the problem. And the third point then is that in Kenya we have an amazing constitution, and we really have some great laws, whether it be the act that provided land and recognition to the Nubian people, or Ryan, this groundbreaking recognition of the intersex community under law. But the gap actually between those beautiful laws, Mildred, you said it too on the Disability Act, the gap between those laws and actually making them real and living up to their promise is where we're falling down. So some progress, reinforcing inequalities, and the gap between legal frameworks and the reality of rights. So with all of that said, Anami, to you first, what would you say if you had one action to call for today? What would it be?
One would be solidarity. I think the way I've just heard from the panel, people are discussing, we have different issues that we need to tackle. And also, just you have mentioned, we are having a progressive constitution, a very, very good constitution, but the question is, why are we not implementing it? Because we have narrowed it down to maybe coming up with let's say like acts. So these are barriers to implementation of and to bring out solution and actions of the issues that we are finding. We want to find solution. So solidarity will be how are we going to unite and also maybe address issues of maybe Nubian communities and also people with special needs also. So let the issue of people with special needs to be also my issue, because I don't know, tomorrow I might maybe have a child who will have the same situation. So how are we going to tackle this? Solidarity is key. So we are going to speak at the same language and also to come up with actions so that we can address this issue and also face those who are in government and also who are supposed to implement this, because they are the one who are also part of the oppressing us. Like just for example, I've mentioned our center was demolished, part of the demolitions that were conducted. I was so happy to see social justice center working group members coming to visit us and also to see how comrades are faring in. So we should not end this conversation here. How are you going to move forward? How are you going to help each other? Because we are brothers and sisters, despite coming from different background, we are facing different challenges. Today we are speaking about demolitions in Mukuru. Maybe tomorrow it will be in Kibra or maybe somewhere else. So how are you going to raise these voices and also include like the one who is blogging also to write for us articles, because media was also hindered to and blocked to air out those issues. So if we have maybe solidarity and partnership with those people who are blogging, they could also write maybe a blog and articles, maybe they publish about it outside there. So we are in the world of crisis, and the issue here and solution is how we're going to unite, and solidarity is the key word that we should underline, and we'll be moving forward with it from this session.
Anami, now I wish I'd come to you last, because that would have been a terrific note on which to end, a clarion call for solidarity across the communities of inequality and marginalization. Jane, your challenge is to beat that one.
So much. Coming from solidarity, the other action is we need to domesticate the good law that we have in Kenya. Making sure that we review and see the law that already we have. Is it inclusive? Or if it is not inclusive, how do we make it inclusive so that all of us work in the same spirit of solidarity, in the same spirit of one word? As much as we domesticating the law, because I believe when we domesticate the law, it should run from top going to the ground, so that these laws are simplified in a language, or even making public in a language that everybody understands. If I come from a community and it's Samburu, it should be made in a way that the majority of the population, 95%, not access to. How does the government come up with the mechanism so that those communities can access those policies, and making sure that those communities understand very well that this policy already exists. These policies are reached to every citizen of this republic, so that all of us can talk in the same words, in the same spirit, and agitate, and making sure that a country for everybody. And wherever I am, that I'm very proud to say that I'm a very proud Kenyan, that I can access free basic need like healthy facility, like water. Where I come from, water is a challenge. Still, I'm almost close to where was school under tree. Accessing water, you can still walk 40 minutes to go to water. Make sure we bring gap that all of us can speak. Even that one, it will reduce a lot of inequality. I don't look at somebody in Nairobi or in central Kenya. You're accessible to the government, and you're free to get every medical, healthy, roads, rain free. Where I come from, I walk several kilometers to get a motorbike. so that I can access to healthy facility. So those are some of the things that I think that action we do so that all of us are free and all of us feel that we are equal. And this one, it will also address around issues on inequality, around issues on discrimination. Either I come from pastoralist community, person with a disability, intersex, which also culture and norms and environment also reduce them to access some of these basic rights we are talking about. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jane. So you're joining with Anami on the call for solidarity, but also a powerful call to domesticate this good legislative framework that we have. Naima, I'm going to come to you, and then Paul, just a heads up, I'm coming to you after that. Naima, to you. Try this one.
My call to action living here would be awareness creation and engaging duty bearers. Let us engage the duty bearers, let us engage the legislators and all other stakeholders that are instrumental into the to bring the changes that we want. So especially when we're dealing with laws and policies that advocate or rather do not help us with regard to equality and non-discrimination, then these are the people we need to engage with to ensure that we move forward protected. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. I think I'm going to have to, we'll just have to make do with one, I think, at this point. So Paul, let me come to you.
Thank you. I just want to pick up from her. One action that I take from here, especially the duty bearers who are present here, we must deliberately invest in listening. The community voices are so powerful. It is in listening that we are going to understand the diversity in the opportunities, the diverse gaps that exist, and how to practically draw solutions for them. We must be ready to transform from one form to another form. We cannot sit back and assume that we never knew that there are people who are walking 40 kilometers to fetch water. We must be ready to take action and invest in transformation. Now, lastly, is that there will be emerging violations, and there will be emerging contexts and circumstances that we must deal with. We must be ready to take up those boldly, and we must not fear from any disruptions. Or disruptions, sometimes positive disruptions, and taking things to a different notch is always a and welcome.
Thank you so much. I think we'll all be using hand sanitizer after this, since we've been sharing the one microphone, but thank you for bearing with us. That was lovely, because from the rights holder perspective, Naima called for awareness raising and strengthened engagement. If that's from the rights holder perspective, and from the duty bearer perspective, we had the obligation first to listen and then to deliver. It made a really nice counterpoint. Mildred, I'm going to come to you, and then Ryan for the final word.
Thank you very much. For me, the call to action would be to embrace the principles of inclusion in policy implementation and programming. And I would just want to emphasize on 4 things. One is comprehensive accessibility. So accessibility is everything. If people cannot access services or products, then they cannot participate in processes. And this means a lot to people with disability. Secondly is participation. If we discuss all these good things without the wearer of the shoes in the room, then it's as good as just spending time and losing out on important population. The other thing is awareness. Let's create awareness so that this message goes out to everyone. And finally, let us implement, develop, and actualize policies and programs from a human rights perspective, so that we do away with the aspect of tokenism to certain people who appear to be marginalized. Let's look at it as a human rights issue, which apparently we've discussed it this morning, that we were all born equal. So if it's a human rights, then it shouldn't be really segregated or put into different layers so that other people come after others have been sorted out. Thank you.
For me, I will talk about public education and awareness creation, so that we can break the norm that we believe that someone can be born as an outcast, so that we'll be able to embrace everyone and give them a chance to grow, so that when a child being born intersex and maybe being raised as a girl, a time now, when the puberty hit and now you want to say who you are, people will not start seeing you as a burden in society. Because sometimes I do tell people, we don't need rules and policies for you to treat your brother and your sister well. Sometimes it's upon us to stand. Then sometimes it's upon us to stand, even before make sure you your brother and sister is, because tomorrow you don't know whether you'll be the same you'll be the person to be in the same shoe where they are, or your child or someone who is related to you. Thank you.
So, to try to summarize that, it was just good when we're calling for action. From Ryan, educate, teach, reach. From Mildred, include, participate. From Naima, raise awareness and engage. From Paul, listen and then deliver. From Jane, domesticate, take it home. And Anami, as I said, really want to end with you. Remain solid. Stay in solidarity, act in solidarity across this cascade of different inequalities. So thank you so very much, friends, for sharing your experience, sharing your wisdom with us. I know we all learned a huge amount. May I invite everybody to give them a round of applause. So, I think we're improvising a little with the program. I believe what we're going to do next is that we'll leave the stage and cede it to our entertainers. Is that right? Madam Moderator, take it from here. Get rid of us.
Oh, excellent. Thank you so much. I think they deserve another round of applause. And yes, and a bottle of hand sanitizer for sure. This one's better? I'm informed this one works better. Let's see if that works better. There we go. Thank you so much to each of our panelists, and of course, to our very, very able moderator. A round of applause for him as well. Surely, if there's something that I have taken away also, it's the intersectionality of things. I must say, Mildred, that I overheard a conversation you were having earlier. Where you said, when people see crutches, they only think of me as disabled and forget that the issues affecting women also affect me. And sometimes it's forgetting that there's an intersectionality of things, that I could be born intersex of a Nubian and Samburu background in Mugurupa gender. and that perhaps for not just the duty bearers who we often point to as government. Another mic? Okay, no problem. We're doing musical mics today. Is this one working? Yes? No? No? Is it now? Okay.
Mic check, mic check.
I used to be on radio. I can totally. They're going to figure out the mics, and we're going to keep plowing on.
Mic check,
I'm
mic check.
going to ask, is that one working now? All right, we're going to work with that one for a little bit. Because what cannot be stopped?
Check 1, 2.
Fill in the blank. I want to, so my clarion call, if I might just have one, is even for the agencies and for us as institutions, that we don't come and handle only the intersex, and then someone else comes and handles that they are Samburu, and then the third one that they are a woman or that they need education, and the fourth one that, and at the end of the day, no one addresses the entirety of the human being. That I think that there's something for us as institutions ourselves to consider and to rethink about how we are redefining our own successes. I want to invite back onto the stage Spontaneous the Poet and the entirety. Actually, Spontaneous seems to be... Well, I want to invite you onto the stage to just liven things up a little bit before we go on to the launch. This will require some amount of work because we will need, I think you'll need your keyboard, won't you? So if we can get the keyboard on the stage and the microphones onto the stage real quick. Now, I will volunteer young men to do this if it does not move quickly. Oh, excellent. Thank you for coming down from the stage, from up on the stage. Thank you. Fantastic. If you are tweeting, and you rightly should be, I think so many people need to hear what is being talked about today. The hashtags are all equal. Hashtag rebuild fairer. Hashtag stand up for, the number 4, human rights. And please tag the OHCHR Kenya, Haki KNCHR, and UN Kenya, and UN Human Rights. And for those who are following live stream on Facebook, please make sure that you do tag all of those, plus the hashtags again, all equal, rebuild fairer, and stand up for human rights. As they do come onto the stage, I want to invite the representatives of the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights and the University of Nairobi to come thereafter for the launch of the Haki Journal of Human Rights, University of Nairobi. So first, ladies and gentlemen, take it away.
Greetings, beautiful people.
Greetings.
Greetings one more time.
Greetings.
If I say greetings, you say give thanks for life. Greetings one more time.
Give thanks for life.
Welcome very much to the University of Nairobi. Feel at home. I'm a student here myself, and I must say that this is one of the universities in Kenya actually that supports gender. I come from the Center of African Women's Studies, and I think it's one of a kind for any university to have in that center. And karibuni sana. I go by the name of Nile, like the river Nile. Yes. You talk about change and talk about things that we want, not what we need. And you talk about this and how we lack brains to move on while people die. And some days people just can't take it different and to seek different. This next song is called Jeshi. And so I want to teach you the chorus, and I want you to help me sing it too. Jeshi means soldiers. And so we are the soldiers for change. We are the soldiers for something different. We are the Jeshi. Everybody say Jeshi.
Jeshi.
Comrades power. Comrades power. Comrades power.
Power.
Yes, sir. Sera zenyu zote tumechoka sikiza, daily ni uongo kutupanga kadonda, sambaza mumeseti ndio mukule kabisa, sisi ndio jeshi. Jeshi. And you respond with jeshi. Alright? Tumeshika lesson? So let's pull it up again. Let's start one more time. Alright? Zenyu zote tumechoka sikiza, daily ni uongo kutupanga kadonda, sambaza mumeseti ndio mukule kabisa, sisi ndio jeshi. Jeshi. Ukora mumejaza midhili sungura, ukabila ndiyo panga muko ready kukata, na dini ndiyo damu muko ready kumwaga, sisi ndio jeshi. Jeshi. Na hisi cha baba mengi twapitia, ni gani solution? Usipocheza fiti weka new position, sisi ndio jeshi. Jeshi. Wa hii ni jeshi la wokovu, hii sio yenye ninaongelelea. What? Sisi ndio jeshi. Jeshi. Usipoziba ufa utajenga ukuta, heri kufa macho kuliko moyoni. Hisi boka soka tuko ready mandoni, sisi ndio jeshi. Jeshi. Fire. Here, I call them the empresses, the queens in the house. We have a responsibility, not only to ourselves, but to the generations that we care for, to generations that we bring forth. And to change a nation, women need to partake, because we are the custodians of any culture. Be it a positive or a negative.
That deserves a round of applause, surely. Sadly, in the interest of time, we'll have to cut it short there. What I think everyone is asking is when the forthcoming album will be out. So I think that's the next step before you leave.
So before the album, we are doing a project called Black Woman. So Project Black Woman is to raise awareness of sexual and reproductive health of incarcerated women in Kenya. So the women in the prisons. And so if you'd like to partake, we just need 1 pad or 2 pads or a panty or a soap. Anything you have, or even water, that's it. Because they are the forgotten ones before COVID came, and now the situation is not very positive. So that's our call to all the women, celebrating Black women in the adversities and all we go through. And before I leave, I would like to say this. Black woman, you're so fine, just like wine, shaded from the Nile, cherry red, full of glow. Give thanks.
Always. Thank you ever so much. And now I will invite you back onto the stage, Dr. Maguessa, to, I think, go through this next part, which is the launch of the Haki Journal of Human Rights as the last thing we do before we close out. Karibu.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator, the Vice Chancellor, University of Nairobi, Professor Kiama. 10 years ago, I walked into this university when I was heading the Public Education and Training docket at the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. I was sent with one message to the university then, that go and prepare for a meeting of collaboration between the University of Nairobi and the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights. I recall meeting Professor Maguessa then and the 3 DVCs and a good number of deans, 10 of them. I had just been sent to meet the VC, but here I met a team of 10 and I was just one. Then I said, this must be a very big meeting. I passed the message that the commission was seeking collaboration with the university on human rights. Today, Vice Chancellor, we have moved, 10 years down the line, we have moved and made progress in terms of collaboration with the university. I know we have done joint researches. Dr. Waka, you are here. You have been very supportive on behalf of the center and the other teams from the University of Nairobi. Today, Vice Chancellor and the guests who are here today, we are launching the Haki Journal out of the partnership, out of the collaboration. The reasoning behind this was that we wanted a platform where academia would be able to express human rights content for various readerships. And as we do this today, I'm very happy that the academia, even the student fraternity, would be able to make contributions to this Haki Journal. For me, it is a dream that has come true. Vice Chancellor, you have given total support to this partnership. And on behalf of the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights as CEO, I want to pledge here that this partnership will continue. We want to take it a notch higher. And I always keep on challenging Dr. Waka. We need to have our own University of Pretoria kind of model. Become the custodians of human rights from, the academic perspective. And as practitioners and as a commission, we are prepared to work together towards this. So as we launch this, Vice Chancellor and the representatives from various organizations here, the ambassadors who are still present here, Dr. Jackson, I can still see you there. This has been a great journey for the Commission and the University of Nairobi. And as I close, we will still continue working with the other universities in the Republic to ensure that human rights education gets a space. We are collaborating closely with the Laikipia University, even where we have a common course for all undergraduate students. which is a plus, and we have also developed content on economic, social, cultural rights, which then we intend to offer it at diploma level as we progress. We are collaborating also with the Kisii University, and I saw the representative of the Vice Chancellor. I don't know whether he is still in the room. Yes, Dr. Moitui, also the Dean of School of Law, Kisii University, representing the VC. I think this kind of collaboration is going to give us that energy that we need. With this one, I'm very sure that human rights education will find a space. I hand over to the VC to say something, and then we formally launch this Haki Journal.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bernard Maguessa. You can be assured that we will support that initiative. You saying University of Nairobi to serve as a depository for human rights issues. We shall. Let's engage and do so. I remember when I was young, high school, and after, I was following particularly on the issues of detention, and I was so concerned about that matter. And at some point, I registered to be receiving the magazine on Amnesty International, which I was reading faithfully all over the world to find out the people who have been affected on issues of human rights. So you can be sure you have a partner here. I want to acknowledge all the distinguished guests here, including Dr. Stephen Jackson, the UN Resident Coordinator in Kenya, as well as Mrs. Lee Fang, United Nations Senior Human Rights Advisor, and all other distinguished guests. I'm very pleased to welcome you to the University of Nairobi on this occasion of celebrating the Human Rights Day. I thank the United Nations and the Kenya Commission on Human Rights for choosing the University of Nairobi to host this very important event. The University of Nairobi has always been in the forefront of championing for human rights through our core mandate of generation of knowledge and sharing the same. And you know that some of our own have been detained for engaging on issues of human rights, and some of them were collected after finishing just giving their lectures and taken straight to detention. But we have continued to emphasize as the leadership of the university that the university must constitute those who are human rights defenders, particularly on the issue of free expression. Yeah. And we have continued since I took over the university to encourage that and forum of that kind. That here at the University of Nairobi is where you can be able to share your views of whatever shade without feeling any issue to be that you'll be intimidated or stopped from doing it from any quarter. I think must have been sometimes last year, some of my scholars published something to do with Lake Victoria, that it's pollution, and this pollution may be leading to affecting the health. And some people were calling me to tell them to moderate that. But I still told them, you talk to the scholars directly. As far as they are here in the university, they are well protected to express their academic freedom, because it's within that context that then we'll move the country to another level. Dr. Maguessa, today, and members, today we witness a great milestone in the partnership between the Kenya Human Rights Commission and the University of Nairobi as we launch the Haki Journal of Human Rights. This journal will be an annual online open access publication. This publication seeks to broaden the study and practice of human rights by fostering a critical examination of existing approaches to human rights from an Afrocentric perspective, as well as to develop new dimensions and approaches to the universal theory and practice of human rights. The journal has on its editorial and advisory board distinguished men and women who have contributed to research and the practice of human rights both locally and internationally. This launch is timely and acknowledges the importance of partnership between the academia, industry, practitioners, and stakeholders, allowing for feasibility, mentorship, and the setting of tone for contemporary debate through present and future collection of papers from staff, students, and all our staff. This is indeed very important because it provides a permanent and accessible record of issues of human rights, and therefore it is going to inform the decisions to policymakers and all others that will be concerned to making decisions to do with human rights. And the University of Nairobi will definitely be in the forefront of nurturing and supporting the existence of this journal by providing it in our own website and platform so that it is available to all in the country and out of this country. Asante sana, and God bless you.
That's excellent. Thank you so much, Vice Chancellor. Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, the Haki Journal of Human Rights, ladies and gentlemen. There we go. You know, like you, Prof, I grew up opening letters that were sent by Amnesty International members to free Dr. Njoya. And this is what led me to being at Amnesty International in the way in which I am. And so very often we presume on the small steps, or what appear to be the small steps that we take, and the ripple effects that they have over generations. So once again, to you both and to the entire teams that have made this happen, congratulations. And now for a vote of thanks, allow me to invite once more to the stage, I believe it is one of you from the Kenya National Commission on Human Rights, is that correct? No, well, the two gentlemen seemed ready to stand, so it is to you that I shall invite. You're not allowed to leave the stage. This is your moment of glory. Excellent. Dr. Walker, please give him a round of applause as he comes up onto the stage. A few remarks and a vote of thanks.
Thank you for this opportunity, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and all protocol observed. On this occasion of the International Human Rights Day, I want to thank everybody, all of us, for being vigilant on matters human rights. First of all, let me thank the UN and their representatives for the effort and recognizing that this is an important day that should be celebrated within the framework of academia, because we provide the content. Let us give an applause for them. Kenya National Commission on Human Rights is an important institution. It has, within the period it has been around, played an important role. Some of us who've been around for long, we know what we are talking about. Today, we are not talking about mainstreaming human rights. We are talking about promoting human rights. An applause for them, please. Amnesty International, an important cog in the wheels of human rights. We know what they do. Let us thank them immensely. All the other organizations, kindly let us give them an applause because of their efforts for coming. The Vice Chancellor, University of Nairobi, we know you are a busy man, that I can tell you. The current period is not just busy, but extra busy. Let us thank him for his time and availing the institution for this. Thank you, sir. Finally, let me thank ourselves for being here, being patient, and remembering that human rights are important. Let us remember that all human, all equal. All human, all equal. All human, all equal. Thank you very much, and have a good day. Thank you.
Indeed, thank you very much for those remarks. And at this point, it is my extreme pleasure to declare this convocation. Is it a convocation? I must check with the Vice Chancellor, lest he revoke my degree. Officially closed. I wish you well. And I hope that the 16 days of activism only act as a reminder that for the other 300 and complete the math, those who have gone through 844, that we must be vigilant, we must be active, we must keep fighting until all humans are all equal everywhere in the country and in the world. Thank you, good afternoon, happy Jamhuri Day, Merry Christmas if we do not meet before, a prosperous, new and peaceful year for next year. Na tusichoke. Asanteni sana.